Hello, fantasy baseball fans. I'm Paul Williamson. This is Fantasy MLB Today, a Sports Ethos presentation brought to you by FanDuel. As always, it's an honor and a privilege to give us podcast, give you all some information, advice to help you win your leagues, give you the boost. Before we get into conversation for today, of course, got my weekend update, go through some critical injury updates that happened over the weekend and get you some information on how to deal with them. So make sure, but first, remind you to follow me on Twitter at PaulW_34. That's at PaulW_34 to get more of me, ask you questions, hit me up. Let's get ready to win this year. Same thing on Bluesky. No underscore at Paul W34 there. And then follow Sports Ethos Fantasy Baseball accounts at Ethos Fantasy BB on Twitter, at Ethos Fantasy MLB on Bluesky. Getting updates all over any season content. When the blur feed pops off, know when we have our new Work the Waiver articles come out. Everything you need to know, everything you need to win your leagues are going to be there for you. So check out those socials. And then, of course, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast. Where you get podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Audible, wherever you get them. And also on YouTube at Sports Ethos and the Sports Ethos YouTube channel, where my podcast will be on Mondays and Tuesdays. Now, before, of course, as always, we'll give you a stream of the day and a FanDuel bet of the day, the pitching stream of the day for Tuesday, because today is Monday, so I'll give it to you for Tuesday. It's going to be Sean Burke going up against the Guardians. And the Guardians in the month of June against righties have a 100 WRC plus, but that was most of those games are with a guy named Jose Ramirez. You may have heard of him. He's no longer in that lineup, and that makes this lineup super weak, super not scary. I mean, you got Brian Rocchio is the 3-hole hitter. Reese Hoskins is the cleanup guy now. Outside of Travis Bazzana at the top and Kyle Manzardo against righties, there really isn't anything in this lineup that really scares me to go up against. And Sean Burke, while he's not a flashy arm, he has his moments, but he's not, some must-start dude. But against an offense like the Guardians, I think you got to use him. Over his last 6 outings, he does have just a 4.14 ERA, a 4.13 FIP. That's not great, but that's good enough to face a Guardian offense, especially considering he has an 11% swinging strike rate and a 28% strikeout rate in these times. So he misses some bats. He gets you some strikeouts. The White Sox should beat the Guardians here, get you a decent win chance. And it's even a plus. An even better streaming option if we find out Sean Burke gets an opener tomorrow, which happens to him from time to time. And so watch out for that. That only adds to his value there. And so first, for me, Sean Burke on Tuesday should be a fine streaming option. And then the FanDuel bet of the day is Grant Holmes getting over 4.5 strikeouts. That's plus 120 on FanDuel. Now, Grant Holmes is not a special, he's an okay arm, but he's still been missing bats this year over his last 6 starts. He's a 12.3% swinging strike rate and a 22% strikeout rate. He's going up against a Padre offense that is rates 5th and strikeout rate over the last 30 days against right-handed pitching. And so we have the Padres offense that has been really bad pretty much all year, been striking out a lot all year, and the same thing is true now over their last 30 days. And you got an arm like Grant Holmes that has enough swing and miss to take advantage. And plus, he would plus money here on over just 4.5, so just needs 5 strikeouts here to get to where to cash in. I like these odds. I like this bet here for Monday. All right, so let's get into the weekend update, y'all. I'm going to begin with the return of Kyle Teel. This is news that broke today on Monday. And Teel, I think, is someone you got to watch for in 12-team one-catcher leagues. I don't think he's a must-add in these leagues. He is an add in every single 2-catcher league. There's absolutely no doubt about that because he had a pretty solid beginning to his major league career last year, sitting at 8 homers and 297 plate appearances with a few steals. He slashed 273, 375 with a 411 on the slug, a 125 with a WRC plus. He showed some decent metrics, had the walk rate up to 12.5%. Did keep the strikeout somewhat under control at 25%, but we're definitely going to see the need that number drop down for him to become a solid 12-team one-catcher play because he does have it did have decent enough StatCast numbers here. The 9.6 on the barrel, 37% on the hard hit rate. A good launch, okay launch. 11.9 degrees. He's got to improve that overall contact rate up for 73%. That's got to get better. At the end of the day, what we're going to look for with Kyle Teel, I think, is going to be a guy that is just a solid batting average, power kind of guy. He has a solid line drive approach. He doesn't have a ton of lift, but it's also not a lot of ground balls either. So maybe we see him transition some of those line drives and the fly balls going to tap in a little bit more to the power. But at the end of the day, I think Kyle Till is someone who's going to bat probably around 250, 260, be on a pace for around 15 or so home runs. I mean, maybe I'll give him not enough credit on the batting average front. Maybe it's a little better than that. But in terms of his most likely outcome, that's where he is. And the White Sox offense is pretty good. And so there's some RBI and run opportunities there for you as well. So at the end of the day, in order for him to be a 12-team one catcher option for me, we got to see the improvements in the hit tool. Got to get that strikeout rate down a little bit. We got to get that overall contact rate up a little bit. But if that does end up happening, I do think he is a 12-team one catcher league. So keep your eye out in those setups. If you're in a two catcher league, scoop him up right now. Okay. Let's see here. We're going to talk a little bit about Bobby Witt here. Injury list is still possible for him, even though it hasn't been announced. He's missed 3 games in a row now with a grade 1 MCL sprain in his right knee. So it's not a major sprain. Any kind of IL stint would likely be minimal, but it might be enough for them to warrant it because it's hard to play shorthanded with a guy who can't start yet. And so, got to keep an eye on Bobby Witt here. He might go to the injured list here. And Boyle, I mean, he's been exactly who we thought he would be. Batting 294 with an 833 on the WRC plus, WRC, and 833 on the OPS. He has 10 home runs, 28 steals, 11.9% on the barrel rate. He does have the best hard hit rate of his career at 52.5%. So Bobby Witt is Bobby Witt. He's still Bobby Witt. He's going to be Bobby Witt. Don't need to worry about this. It's going to be a short IL stay if there is one. So, but just keep an eye out. Unfortunately, in your weekly change leagues, you probably can't start him because he might miss the entire week. So that might be a little bit too risky. So I would look for other options of weekly change leagues. The guy who's getting run in his spot is Nick Lofton, and he's just a desperate deep league play. He's got a decent barrel rate and a decent-ish hit tool. Nothing that's going to make me scream to the top of the mountains. Add Nick Lofton. If you're in a deep league, like in one of those AL only leagues or a 20 teams or deeper league, then he's going to get enough run for you to potentially use him there. But that's the only utility I think Nick Lofton has. Francisco Lindor is going to finally looking like he's finally going to come back. Mike Puma of New York Post is all reporting that Wednesday is the earliest chance that he would return, but it could be later than that. So definitely keep your eye out. I've talked about Lindor a ton of the podcast already throughout his injury. Just remember, I think he's a buy low considering how poorly he started the year, but he still has the hard hit metrics, the barrel rate metrics, the hit tool numbers are all there for him. All those underlying metrics where you want them to be, and he does not match up with the production that we saw from him. And so for me right now, if you can get Francisco Lindor on your team for someone in the top 50 to the top 75 range, I would do that because I do think that Francisco Lindor should be a first or second round asset for the rest of season. Elly De La Cruz is looking like he's going to be coming back on Tuesday. And let me reiterate something I already talked about on the podcast, where I think Elly De La Cruz has a chance to be the best fantasy player for the rest of the season because he got his overall contact rate in the month of May up to 76%. Now, don't get it twisted. This is a top 1 percentile outcome for Elly De La Cruz. I don't know how much I expect that 76% overall contact rate to continue because he's never had that good of a contact rate before in his career. However, it was an entire month. It was over 100 plate appearances of that number. And for me personally, that is the kind of sample size that gets me to at least be somewhat intrigued by it because it's not like a hella small, like 2-week sample with just about 40 plate appearances or anything like that. It is over 100 plate appearances that we saw this contact rate. Now, it's still not a big sample. It's still not one that you can really hang your hat on. I'm not saying go out and trade Shohei Ohtani for Ellie De La Cruz. What I am saying is that he is someone that I think could force his way into the top 2 or 3 picks for 2027 next year if for somehow he is able to maintain that contact rate, because that really has been the one thing that has prevented Ellie De La Cruz from being a surefire top 2 or 3 pick in fantasy baseball has been the hit tool. But he is so damn good. The hit tool can be bad, like or not. It has to can just be serviceable and still be an amazing option for your fantasy team. He's still a first round pick, top 10 or 12 kind of dude, even with the lower contact rates, because he does hit the ball with that much authority. He does so many things well, gets you plenty of steals. But if he can find a way to get that contact rate up, then watch out, everybody. Then next year we could be talking about Ellie De La Cruz as a potential draft pick ahead of Shohei or Judge or Juan Soto in that camp, Bobby Witt even, because if that's the only thing that is standing in his way from being a part of that upper echelon of fantasy players. Let's see here. Brandon Woodruff is looking like he's going to be returning on today on Monday. And at the end of the day, we have a shoulder inflammation here. And what we have heard is throughout his rehab assignment is that he has working on lowering his arm slot. Now, this is not an abnormal thing for pitchers coming back from a shoulder injury, because a lower arm slot puts less strain and less stress on the shoulder. And so this isn't abnormal, but it does lead to a change in the pitch mix. It changes the way the pitches react. And so we got to so I am very intrigued to see what we see from Woodruff tonight. I'm going to be looking to see how the movement on his pitches are different, how he changes his pitch mix to adapt to the new movement. Because all those things have to change. He is someone that so far this year has provided decent enough ratios, a 360 on the ERA and a very good 1.03 whip, but the strikeouts have disappeared down to just 20.7%. We're used to seeing Woodruff in the 29 to 30% range. The swing and strike rate has gone away down to 10.8%. The overall contact rate is up to 78%. He still induces soft contact. He still limits the walks. And I think at the end of the day, his floor is like an accumulator in the kind of Logan Webb, like a poor man's Logan Webb range, a guy who's going to get you 6 to 7 innings to start with good ratios. They're going to be able to accumulate some strikeouts for you with a good enough strikeout rate. That's who I think that's his floor, right? And in my opinion, that's like a top 30 or so starting pitcher. And that's great. That's just fine. But we obviously got to see those strikeouts get back up to where they were before we consider him an SP1. But at the end of the day, we really got to see what this Monday start brings. How does the pitch mix look? How does he change his pitch mix? Because what the frustrating part for me when it comes to Woodruff is that last year, when he returned from his long injury stint, he threw a lot more cutters and less four seamers, and it worked out beautifully. This year, he didn't scrap the cutter, but he's not throwing it as often as he did last year. And that four seam is a highly used pitch. And that confused me because he had to adapt to lower velocities last year. And he did a really good job by incorporating that cutter. I thought we would see the cutter incorporated even more this year. We have not seen that. Maybe with the lower arm slot, we see more cutters, because a lower arm slot could lead to a more effective cutter because the different type of movement that you get just from changing the arm slot. And so maybe we start to see more cutters and less fastballs, because a lower arm slot also affects four seam ride. It becomes more of an arm side pitch than a pitch going to have more induced vertical break and more ride to it. So maybe that is where we see more cutters and less four seamers from that perspective. So again, got to see what happens. All speculation. We got to see how he lands. No, not even it's not even worthwhile looking at how the pitch mix was used in the minors because he was just toying with it. He was just playing with it. There wasn't like any time you see a pitcher in rehab assignments or spring training games, you can't read very much into the results. You can't read too much in how the pitch mix was used because he wasn't caring about results. He was like, "Hey, I want to really work on this pitch. I really want to work on throwing this pitch for strikes." And he's not necessarily out there competing to win. And so, even looking at the minor league numbers, it's not really going to tell us a whole lot. What he does when the game is real, the lights are on, and we're in the majors, that is what I am intrigued by. Corey Seager is looking like he's not going to return for at least a couple of days. Before we started the podcast, I learned he's going to begin facing live batting practice tomorrow. He was not in the lineup on Monday. He's on the 7-day IL concussion list right now. He's been on it for well over 7 days at this point, still showing mild concussion symptoms. And so he is definitely someone that probably is going to be back quick enough to warrant starting right now. So you got to keep an eye on him. His fantasy value hasn't really changed much, in my opinion. He's someone that I think is still a bit of a buy low, even though he did hit 2 home runs in the 5 or 6 games that he was back. But we got to still see him improve that hit tool. Got to see him improve the strikeout rate because I talked about this ad nauseum already. He has like a 25% plus strikeout rate, a 70% or so overall contact rate. Those numbers are normally way better than that for Corey Seager. At the end of the day, he's got to improve those hit tool numbers. I think he eventually will. I think he eventually will be someone that is going to correct those hit tools because we've seen way too much of a track record for him to be this poor at not making contact. The quality contact is still there. It is still a 15% plus barrel rate with really good exit velocity, the hard hits. That's all still there for him. He just has to make contact with the ball, and he will be fine. Randy Arozarena is returning on Tuesday, and I think that he is bound for a pretty decent end of the campaign. Look, over his last 115 plate appearances prior to going to IL, the bat speed started to creep back up from 70 miles per hour, 70.9 miles per hour up to 71.7. The fast swing rate started to slowly creep back up to 25%. The barrel rate's gone back up to 10.3% as opposed to 7.6% on the year. And that number is normally in the double digits anyway. So it's good to see him get that barrel rate back up to where it was. The hard hit rate had gone up to 46%, up from 43%. The strikeouts continue to get better for him. He's normally in the high 20s on this number. He was down to 18.8%, and this time is down to 21% for the season. So we're seeing an improved hit tool. We're starting to see the hard hit numbers come back, starting to see the barrel rate come back. The ground ball number even got better. It was way too high to begin the year, over 50%. We're now down to 47.4% in this time. The expected stats have been well over the surface stats all year. And so I think Randy Arozarena is someone that he's not an aggressive buy low just because I don't know, because I would imagine his fantasy managers still value him highly because of the stolen bases that we've seen from him so far. So it's not a major buy low, but go ahead and see what you can get. So I do what you would need to give up for a Arozarena, because I do think that he is someone that should return excellent value rest of season, because we're starting to see the key metrics that were down to begin the year have started to come back before he went down on the injured list. And so I think that he started to correct himself. We started to see the Randy Arozarena that we've grown accustomed to seeing, with great barrel rates, but now with a better strikeout rate and improving on the lift. And so there are some positive signs here for Arozarena. I am excited about the rest of his campaign. Shane Bieber is going to be turning to the rotation on Tuesday. And it wasn't pretty in the minor leagues, but remember what I just got done saying about starting pitchers, particularly veterans, going through minor league rehab assignments. They're not worried about the results. They're just working on specific pitches. They're working on their stamina. They're working on getting their arm strength back. And so this might just be a scenario where Shane Bieber was just trying to throw strikes just trying to get his arm strength back, not really worried about pitch sequencing. He might have had a start where he just focused on throwing one particular secondary. He started to work on just throwing one particular fastball, whatever it is. And so it's hard to read too much into it. However, and it was a 6.88 ERA and a 1.88 whip. I mean, like, those are dreadful numbers. And I mean, like, I get having poor minor league starts during the rehab, like I really do. But my God, a near 7 ERA and a near 2 whip, that's that's going to raise a little bit of red flags, even if it is a minor league rehab assignment. But there are some positives here. He did limit the walks. I think it was only 5 walks in these starts to 14 strikeouts in 16 innings. And the velocity started to come back. He topped out at 93 in his last start, sat between 91, 92. That's really close to his year to date, his numbers from last year where he was moderately successful. He did have a 3.57 on the ERA and a 1.07 whip last year coming back from Tommy John surgery. The swing and miss was solid at 73% on the overall contact, 13.6 on the swing and strike. Had a lot of ground balls as usual. So there were a lot of metrics from last year to life from Shane Bieber. It'd be interesting to see what we see from him this year. Because Brandon Woodruff, I think, is a kind of a warning sign here, is that, like, a pitcher comes back from a long injury and it puts up great numbers that look like they might be back, but then once we start to get a fuller picture and we start to get more innings out of them, then we start to maybe see some of the real red flags. And so for him right now, he is an ad, 12-team leagues, got to make sure he is there. Last time I checked, he was just around 50% roster on Yahoo. So go ahead and make sure he isn't available. I would add him because former Cy Young winner here, y'all. He has that type of upside. He had the really good metrics last year. Now the question becomes, can he continue the type of pace, the type of momentum he gained last year? Because coming back from a long injury, just a 50, 60 pitch innings pitched a sample size isn't enough to really hang your hat on. So we got to see a little bit more from Shane Bieber, and I'm really intrigued to see what we get from him because the talent, I think, was still there. The velocity is right around where it needs to be. The strikeout numbers, the swing and strike numbers were all there from him last year. Can he continue? That's going to be the big question on his return. Let's talk about the revamped Taylor Ward. This is kind of a topic I've been wanting to touch on the podcast, and I think now is the time to do it. He hit a home run this weekend, and it was just his 4th of the year. And for Taylor Ward, that's very low. That is a major power outage from Taylor Ward. But if you dive into the numbers, some of it might be what he wants to do. He's become a significantly more patient hitter. The overall swing rate is down to 32%. He is usually 40% plus. The outside swing rate has dropped dramatically down to just 13%. He's not chasing at anything outside the zone. Nothing outside the zone. He is not chasing at all, which is generally a good thing, But however, the barrel rate is way down to 5%. And that has really impacted his power, with only the 4 home runs, but he has a dramatic, one of the best on-base percentage of his career at .393. That has led to 49 runs and 359 plate appearances as a leadoff hitter. So I think what's happened here in Baltimore, Taylor Ward has become more of a traditional leadoff guy, working the count, getting a lot of walks. He still and he has a dramatically increase in the line drive rate as well. And so he's hitting more line drives, working the gaps, kind of abandoning his power approach. I mean, it depends on your team need if this is good or bad for you. Because last year he hit 36 homers with 100 plus RBI. And that was kind of the guy you drafted him to be. You did not draft him to be high on base to score a lot of runs. You needed him to produce some power. You needed him to produce some RBI. And he's not doing that. And it's looking like it's very much on purpose. He has become a very selective hitter. I mean, he is not swinging at anything outside the zone. He has a great end zone contact rate, a great overall contact rate. And what's weird is that, like, it's not like these were a problem for him in the past. So he has a 10% walk rate for his career. He already only chased like a 20% clip before this year. So it's not like he was a major chase, low walk dude with no on base and all power before this. So he has really sacrificed a ton of power to become an elite on base guy. So he used to be a really good one. Now he's an elite one. So for your fantasy teams, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It sucks overall because he's not the dude you drafted him to be, but at least you're getting the run scored, at least getting on base. He has a really good batting average. All those things are happening for you. So there is still some utility here for him in fantasy, but it does kind of suck that he's not the dude you drafted him to be. He's not a buy low. I think the approach to the plate is on purpose. His power numbers are down as part of a design by him to become a better leadoff hitter, to be a guy that gets on base with the big boppers behind him. And so there is fantasy utility in that. There is some benefit, but the drawback is it's not what you wanted. It's not what you really were looking for. It's kind of like, it's kind of like if you buy a stuffed donut, you think you're getting chocolate, it ends up being fruit. It still might taste good, but damn it, you're expecting chocolate and you're upset. So this is just kind of what you're getting here. You never know what you're. Sometimes with these hitters, you never know what they end up trying to do, what type of difference in their approach that they get, especially when they change teams. So this is probably coming from Orioles management, probably coming from the manager saying, "Hey, we need you to be a more true leadoff hitter for us," because they have legitimate bats behind him. All right. Mickey Moniak is returning to the lineup on Monday. And in my opinion, he is after. So right now, Colorado is going to be in Colorado for the vast majority of the next week and a half to 2 weeks. They are going to play a lot of games in Denver, so you're very excited about that for Mickey Moniak. But I think after this run, after these games in cores, I would try to trade him, try to sell him high because I think he is still a platoon bat that's going to struggle outside of cores. Now, you look at the numbers against lefties and the numbers outside of cores this year, they look pretty okay. It's like over 100 in the WRC plus against lefties, over 100 in the WRC plus outside of cores. But this is a very small sample. I mean, we're talking about, I want to say it was like 30 plate appearances against lefties and about like 60 or so plate appearances outside of cores. That's really small. If you go back and take a look what he's done in his career, particularly last year, what he's done outside of cores and against lefties, it ain't pretty. It ain't good. And which is why I was out on him to begin the year. There hasn't been enough of a sample size this year to change my mind. So once we get out of these core series, once he starts to go back on the road after this heavy cores a set of games, I would try to sell him high. He will probably be someone that you can probably net a top 20, top 25 outfielder, top 25 or so starting pitcher, maybe like a top 10 corner or middle infielder. You're going to be looking to get top 100 value for him because he is someone who's going to have great numbers in cores against righties, right? So that's a subset of a subset of that's a split of a split, right? It's not just against righties, it is against righties at cores because his home and away splits last year were dreadful. His righty versus lefty splits last year were dreadful, and the early returns this year way too small of a sample size to really trust it. This reminds me a lot of Britton Doyle. Britton Doyle had a major campaign, was a major draft pick in 2024, 2025, can't remember which year it was, and I was out because you look at the splits, particularly outside of cores, they were dreadful. And I was saying, no. These splits are too big of a split here for me to trust it. I think the same things happen to Mickey Moniak. The splits here are way too much. It's not even close to large enough of a sample size of the splits for me to really think that he has regained or has gained my trust. He is someone who I am out on. He is someone that you want to hold on to for these cores games, but once he's out of cores, those numbers continue to look great. trade him because you're going to want to have another manager holding that bag whenever the cookie, crumbles. All right. So let's move on to Edward Cabrera. He is returning on Tuesday himself. And with Edward Cabrera, the big thing here is fastball command. What I don't understand is why he is still throwing this freaking four-seamer. Stop throwing the damn thing. Stop throwing it. You can't throw it for strikes. That's the reason why you were horrible before last year. Edward Cabrera was a dumpster fire with a high strikeout rate because he couldn't throw his four seam for strikes. He can throw his sinker for strikes a lot more consistently than he can the four seamer, but he still insists on having high four seam usage. It doesn't make sense to me. Scrap the damn thing. Stop throwing it. Throw the sinker. Throw the sinker. Throw the damn sinker. I don't understand it. It's frustrating me. I need to know why. I want to talk to him about this. Like, bro, why? Why are you doing this? What's the reasoning? I don't get it. But at the end of the day, he has a 31.6% whiff rate on the changeup, a 35% whiff rate on the curveball, a 46% whiff rate on the slider. He's got the stuff still, y'all. His secondaries are elite. He just has to be able to set them up with a fastball that he can actually locate. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be like a major sinker usage. It just has to be enough for them to not get to sit on the secondaries, have them have a pitch that you can use to set up the pitch sequencing that you want to get your outs, because the secondaries are all there for him. His fastball command is dreadful. Gotta fix that. Jared Jones got a hit in the elbow with a comebacker on Sunday, left the game early. And I think that luckily the imaging came back clean. We'll have to wait and see if the Pirates want to push back the start some. Maybe they put him on the IL with a bone bruise or contusion kind of thing. So we'll just have to see. But the lucky thing here is there's no structural damage to the elbow. And it's not like it was a flexor strain. It wasn't like it's an elbow inflammation or elbow tightness or shoulder inflammation or anything like that. He got hit with a comebacker, which is significantly easier for a pitch to come back from than some type of structural damage to his arm. So that's positive. Now, Jerry Jones, I think, is someone that you got to be very, very patient on. He just went through kind of a ringer of matchups. We're talking about at the Astros, at Sacramento, and then the Dodgers. Those are horrible matchups, really, really hard matchups. And look, even through those games, he's still limited the barrels at 8.2%. He still had just a 41% hard hit rate. The overall contact rate is 70.7% with 13.9% on the swing and strike rate. So he was getting the best offenses in the league to swing and miss, getting them to miss barrels, relatively soft contact. And so there were still a lot of things to like about him, even against tough competition. Now he should be getting into a part of the schedule where he should really, really blow up. I'm still in on Jared Jones. The velocity is up across the board for him. The four seamers up from 97.3 up to 98.7. The changeup is up from 89 to 93. The curveball is up from 81 to 85. The slider's up from 88 to 90. And so he's throwing his arsenal harder. We still have great whiffs. It's still looking really, really good for Jared Jones. I think this man is on the verge of a major breakout, especially now because it's tough to face a team of the Athletics in Sacramento. It's tough to face the Dodgers. It's tough to face Houston. It's even harder to do that when you're still trying to knock off the rust from being on the injured list for so long. And so the fact that he still showed these type of awesome swing and miss numbers against some of the best offenses in the worst environments is a great thing. I am still very much in on Jared Jones. Let's just hope that he doesn't miss hardly any time after getting hit. Connor Griffin looking like he's nearing a rehab assignment. And look, he really turned things around in the month of May. And 108 May plate appearances. He had 2 home runs, 7 stolen bases. His slash was nice at 326. 413, 459. The WRC plus is 126. The strikeouts were down to 24.1%. But look, he hasn't really turned his elite bat speed, which is at 75.6 miles per hour with a 58% fast swing rate. He hasn't turned that into hard contact yet. The X velocity was only 86 miles per hour. The barrel rate 6.8. The hard hit rate 39.7. And the X WOBA is only 318. His service WOBA is 359. It also has a 54.8% ground ball rate. And so for me to have confidence that Connor Griffin is going to break out, we got to see him turn that bat speed number into better contact because we have yet to see that from him. The surface numbers look good, but a lot of the underlying metrics spell trouble, especially with a high 54% ground ball rate. He's got to correct that ground ball rate. He's got to get the barrel rate up. He's got to find a way because he's got the bat speed, right? He's got the tools, he's got the talent, and the bat speed numbers show that. But the question is, can he start to make that type of contact? And we know that he can, because that's what's going to get me to buy into Connor Griffin more. I don't know if he's someone that I would. I mean, if you're going to sell him high, right? If you're going to sell him on his way back from the injury list, you need to make sure you get like top 75 value for him. You can't trade him for a bag of chips. You got to get something real in return because the talent is there for him. That is his ceiling. And so if you want to get a manager that wants to buy his ceiling, then go for it. I think it's going to be a really tough sell. He's not someone that I would actively try to do. It's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's still someone that is probably, in my eyes, should be valued realistically at the top 150, top 125 guy. And with the hopes that the prospect pedigree and the bat speed turns him into that top 60 guy. Because that's what you trade him for if you're going to sell him high. You got to make sure you get something real in return. I don't know if that's possible. It doesn't seem very possible, but hey, maybe you find a manager that is over heels for him. It will be willing to trade you somebody fantastic for him, and I would do something like that. But odds of that are happening are very low. Liam Hicks is going on the injury list with lower back tightness, lower back strain, awaiting MRI results as of the recording of this podcast. Now, Liam Hicks has got to be one of the luckiest damn hitters in the history of baseball. Because when I started to look at his overall quality contact numbers, I mean, we're talking about a 31% hard hit rate, 85 mile an hour exit velocity, like a 3% on the barrel rate, and he has 13 home runs with an 831 OPS. I thought, oh, well, he probably has a ton of lift and pull. He's got above average lift and pull at 19.1%, but I was expecting like Isaac Paredes type stuff, like a 30% plus pull air rate. It's not. It's a 19.1% pull air rate. The MLB average is, I think, around 18%. So it's just barely above league average lift and pull with horrible quality contact number. Now, the hit tool is phenomenal. The hit tool is like a sub 5% on the swing and strike rate, that type of elite hit tool. But even with that elite hit tool, and in order for him to have what I call the Geraldo Perdomo effect, Geraldo Perdomo turned in an elite season with just a 6% barrel rate because of his hit tool. Liam Hicks doesn't even have a 6% barrel rate. He doesn't even have that. And so it's very hard for me to believe that Liam Hicks is going to continue to be who he is. If you're in a 12-team one-catcher league, if you don't have an open spot, if you don't have an open IL spot, if you have a decent amount of injuries, you're kind of having to pick and choose. He can't be on your list of possible drops just because I don't know how sustainable his success has been. I mean, good for you for riding the wave, right? Like, I've ridden the wave this year in a lot of my leagues. When I picked him up, I was like, I'm going to pick him up for now, ride the hot streak and wait for it to fall off. It just hasn't fallen off. And sometimes this happens in baseball. You get a guy that doesn't have very good metrics, doesn't hit the ball particularly hard, doesn't really pull the ball or lift the ball very much, and he still produces out of his freaking mind, and we're seeing it right now. And so but maybe, he's not like a must hold. He's not like a strong hold because the metrics are just not there for him. Now, if you can stash him on an IL spot, if you have this spot on your roster that if you hold on to him, you're not going to take a major hit anywhere else, then okay, you can hold on to him. But that's what I call a soft hold. He's someone that if you can hold on to him, do it. But if you got to jettison him, he can be on your list of drop candidates on your roster because I don't know how sustainable his success would be. In his stead, we might be seeing more Esteury Ruiz. You know, got Owen Casey at DH. Griffin Conine's come back to what the man, his part of the outfield. Heriberto Hernandez, and let's see here. It's looking like he might be platooning against lefties here. But Esteury Ruiz, man, he's batting 260. He has 14 steals. The hit tool numbers are better than what we saw from him in the past. Still not good enough for me to be gung-ho about him. But you know what? If you're in a league where you need steals, I'd pick him up because he's going to get a lot of them. And remember, he is a 60 steal guy in the majors once already. He's already at 14 steals and 84 plate appearances right now. Pick him up. If you need steals, go for it. I think he's making decent enough contact, making enough contact for him to get on base just enough to steal a ton. And so Esteury Ruiz is someone is helpful if for a particular team context in a categories league. That's who he is. I wouldn't get overly excited here, but if you need steals, I'd pick him up. Mick Abel, man, he suffered a setback. He threw a 20-pitch bullpen on Friday before he was supposed to return on Sunday, and he had a setback. They're getting more imaging done. Hopefully, it's just a minor setback. We'll see him in the rotation next week or something like that. But generally speaking, when a pitcher has a setback like this, it means additional weeks on the injured list. So just keep an eye on the situation. I mean, I was excited because he had a great spring. They kind of toyed with his usage to begin with, right? They had him as an opener and had him as a bulk reliever behind an opener to begin the year. The first start back wasn't very pretty, but then he had two amazing starts. He had two starts in April that were phenomenal. They were the Mick Abel we thought he would be, and then he got hurt. And so I was very excited to see if he can continue what he started. But as of right now, we got to see what happens. You'll hold on to him for now and wait and see what news we get. But if we get bad news, it's going to be on the shelf for weeks yet again. He might be someone you can jettison to your wires. Let's see here. Emilio Pagan is someone who is nearing a rehab assignment. And man, the Reds, I don't know what they're going to do because Pagan was not very good before he went down, right? The ERA was what was it? 6.43 on the ERA, a 5.82 on the FIP. The strikeouts are way down to 17%. He just wasn't very effective at all. Now the Reds in his stead have had a very hard time filling his spot, but finally Tony Santillan has started to turn things around. He started to nail down the Reds' closers role. In the month of June, we see a 3.68 ERA. The swinging strike rate is up to 12.8%, and he has a 52% ground ball rate as opposed to a 59% fly ball rate from Pagan. And the pitching in Great America Ballpark, I would trust the ground ball pitcher that actually is showing swing and miss over the fly ball pitcher who has lost his swing and miss. And so there might be a thought that Pagan is just the presumed closer when he returns. If Santillan continues to pitch like this, if he starts to be the guy who we kind of thought would be, right? He was a guy who was floated out there with Graham Ashcraft as a potential closing option for the Reds when Pagan first went down. But he shat the bed. So did Graham Ashcraft. So did everybody else that they tried to throw out there as a closer. I mean, it was a real dumpster fire in the ninth inning for the Reds when Pagan first went down. Santillan has finally started to produce some kind of stability in the back end of that bullpen. And when Pagan comes back, if Santillan is still pitching like this, I wouldn't just assume Pagan's going to get his job back. I wouldn't just presume that. I think it's a very real possibility that Santillan might pitch his way into a permanent job in the ninth inning. Sticking the bullpen, got two more names to go over. Daniel Palencia, back on the injury list with what's been characterized as a mild flexor sprain. We learned on Saturday they're going to be ramping him up fairly quickly. Maybe this is a short-term minimum IL stay, but the fact that he went on the IL just a couple days later, they're already talking about ramping him back up. That's great news. And now in terms of the short term, the two ads are Jacob Webb and Caleb Thielbar. If you remember the first time Palencia went on the injured list, there was a revolving door of closers for the Cubs. Thielbar got some saves. Webb got an opportunity here and there. Ben Brown was still a reliever then. He got a couple of nights. There wasn't Hobie Milner got like a save or two. It was kind of I didn't really know who was going to get the ninth, and it might still be that situation. But if you're hunting for saves and you really really need somebody. Jacob Young's on a bad bet. Neither is Caleb Thielbar. That might just be short term, considering that Palencia is potentially really close to returning already. And finally, Yuri Perez potentially returning this weekend off of his injury stay is going to end up looking like it's going to end up a lot shorter than we thought it would be. So that's good news. But he's kind of the inverse of Edward Cabrera. Edward Cabrera has fastball command issues with good secondaries. Yuri Perez has really good fastball command. His fastball command is phenomenal. Multiple outings where he has 70% plus strike rates on the fastball. It is his secondaries are just like a revolving door of which one's going to be thrown for strikes game in and game out. You never know which secondary is going to be the effective one he's going to be able to turn to. So we'll just have to wait and see how those secondaries look when it comes back, because that's the thing to look for. He just has to consistently throw his secondaries for strikes. And he's a very young arm. This is not like an uncommon problem for young arms. It's consistent command. Yeah, he's 22 years old? Dude's still a kid. He just now is able to buy beer. So we got to give him some time, right? You got to understand that, we have very much have a guy who is trying to find his way in the majors, trying to find a way to command his elite stuff. I mean, the stuff is clear as day. You watch him pitch, you see the movement on the secondaries. You see how well that fastball plays. It's good, right? It's all there. He just got to get consistent command. He's got to be able to consistently throw his pitches for strikes. Once he starts to do that, we'll see peak Yuri Perez. He's a little bit of a buy low right now. I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not trading a top 25 guy for him, even though he has SP1 upside. I'm not going to trade an SP2, maybe like a low end SP3, high end SP4. Top 40, top 50 kind of guy for him is where I would be looking to deal for him. But if you're Yuri Perez manager, there's no way in hell you're doing that trade. And so it's technically a buy low, but I don't know how possible or feasible that buy low would be, considering the upside that Perez has. And Perez's fantasy managers are probably love the upside so much that they're probably not going to do that deal. So technically the buy low, but I don't think any kind of deal is really possible. All right, so that brings the end of the podcast, y'all. Thank y'all so much for joining me. As always, an honor and a privilege to give y'all this podcast, give y'all some information, advice, help you win your leads, give your teams a boost. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at PaulW_34. That's at Paul W_34 on Twitter. No underscore on Bluesky. Get more of me. Ask me questions. Hit me up. Let's get ready to win. Same thing. Make sure you follow the Sports Ethos Fantasy Baseball accounts at Ethos Fantasy BB on Twitter, at Ethos Fantasy MLB on Bluesky. Get updates when all of our content comes out to help you win your leagues. And then also make sure you check out that blur feed at sportsethos.com with the MLB tab. Free fantasy baseball analysis there every single day. And then please rate and subscribe to the podcast. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast and rate your podcast on Apple, Spotify, Audible, wherever. And also on YouTube at Sports Ethos YouTube channel, where my podcast will be on Monday and Tuesday. I'm Paul Williamson. There's the Fantasy MLB Today, a Sports Ethos presentation brought to you by FanDuel. Y'all have a good one.